Well, hello everybody. Welcome to the Up North Prevention Podcast. I'm super happy to be here today with my co-host, Mike Maturin. For those of you who do not know, my name is Molly Harvey, and we have a very special guest today with us, Allison Smith. She is the Iosco County Coalition Coordinator and also a family support specialist. She is also an expert on recovery-friendly communities. So she's here to talk to Mike and myself, and we're just going to have a conversation about, what a recovery-friendly community is, and then also just kind of some tips and tricks and ways to help facilitate your own community become more recovery-friendly.
Yeah.
Do you want to start out with a question? Yeah, thank you so much for being here. We're really glad that you're here today.
Yeah, I guess the first question that comes to my mind is really, what does the word recovery mean, and what is exactly a recovery-friendly community?
Yeah, so I think that a recovery-friendly community is simply a community that is making it easier for a person in recovery to continue their sobriety. And that takes on many different facets, but that is the basic definition of a community that's willing to come around individuals who are in recovery to support them in that effort and to continue their sobriety.
Yeah.
That's a great definition, and that's really helpful, I think, for us as well as maybe the listeners, just because, as some people who are listening might know, Mike and I work as prevention specialists doing so much work trying to prevent people from becoming addicted to substances. But then there's that other side where, people have been maybe rehabilitated, they're in that place of recovery. Maybe they just got out of rehab, but then they're trying to go back into a community where maybe they're not completely supported, or maybe that community is wanting to support those people, but they just really the community doesn't have the tools or the support system there to really help facilitate that person staying sober, or staying in that, substance-free place. So I'm so glad that, we're even talking about this, and I think it can be really helpful to so many different communities.
Yeah.
Just
Absolutely.
to start this conversation.
One of the things that plays a role in recovery and the difficulty in getting into recovery is stigma. Molly and I did a video on that a while back. And so what does stigma, how does that play into a recovery-friendly community? What can we do to help that situation?
So I think that stigma for a community looks like an individual who is in recovery or who is striving for sobriety, being met with barriers in their community that's making it not possible.
Yeah.
There's stigma in many things in a community. When someone's in recovery and they go to apply for a job, their community could not be open to allowing someone with a substance use disorder or someone in recovery, and even things as simple as allowing that person to still attend meetings or therapy. Some employers aren't open to adjusting their schedule. So until communities start to view substance use disorder in a different light, I don't think that they're going to have the effort or the ability to become more recovery friendly. They're not going to have the momentum to until people view addiction differently.
Right.
So do you think, would you say that stigma is kind of maybe the biggest barrier for a community supporting somebody who's in recovery? Just the stigma around substance use disorder?
Absolutely. I think there are many barriers. I think we can talk a lot about access to treatment and how, especially in northern Michigan, that can be challenging at times. Those are building blocks that communities can start to address. There's many different things they can do, but stigma, I think, is that foundational block of what they can start to do to become more recovery friendly. And that can be things like, avoiding labels that are hurtful for people who are in active addiction or just starting their sobriety.
That's a great one.
It can be sharing your own story of stigma. It may not be specifically related to substance use disorder, but if you faced a stigma before, being more open about that, offering compassionate support to these people and these that are needing the support in their communities, and then just starting to do things like listening to this podcast or watching these videos and replacing your negative connotations with actual facts about SUD and sobriety, I think, in general.
We spoke in our Stigma video, Molly called it person-centric language,
Yes.
or person-first language, so that we're not, I happen to have diabetes, but that doesn't make me, in the language that we use, that makes me a diabetic.
Correct.
But that's not all of me. I happen to be a person that has diabetes.
Yes.
And there's stigma around that, but not nearly like there is around substance use disorder, mental health issues. And I think if that stigma remains, people are less likely to even seek out treatment because they're ashamed or they're afraid that people are going to look less of them because of the fact that they're struggling. And so I think stigma is a huge barrier, like you mentioned. Access is another one,
Yes.
especially where we work in rural northern Michigan. There's not enough, frankly, of treatment modalities and places where people can get help. Can you address that a little bit about access?
Yeah, and I think too, not only is it not enough options, I guess in a very basic term, not enough options for treatment, it's also, the first time might not be, they may need multiple, they may need multiple attempts at treatment.
Sure.
Right.
And that also plays into stigma, and knowing that just because somebody goes to treatment 1, 2, 7, 15 times, as a community, you need to support them accessing that treatment every single time. So I think that also plays a big role in treatment, is how many we have available, how often they can go, and also funding is something that plays a big role in if people can get treatment or not.
Yeah, that's something that comes to my mind is I know that, so many of these, especially the inpatient treatment centers, they're just extremely expensive, and insurance might pay for one 30-day stay.
Right.
And after that, there's really not any financial support, which is really difficult for somebody who's not going to be working for 30 days or for however long. So,
Absolutely. For communities that are interested in becoming more friendly towards recovery, do you have any points or any suggestions of things that they could do in order to be open to helping folks in recovery?
So I think it starts with stigma, like we've covered quite a bit already today. But then there are things that are maybe a little more lighthearted that people haven't thought about in the realm of recovery. Things like entertainment options, offering a community an event, a music event, sporting event, something that is substance free, or having a substance free section at a ball field, or things like that that tend to be fairly heavily substance centered. And offering events like that, supporting groups, NA, AA meetings in your community, allowing for spaces for them, offering up a church for that meeting, many different things that can be done. But I think stigma is the biggest thing to start with, and then building up from there.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that, because I think, and maybe that's another topic, but it's so amazing how integrated substances are into our culture, and how kind of culturally conditioned we are to believe that it's normal to just engage in some of these activities. And I'm not to shame anybody or to say that in any way that's necessarily wrong, but just to understand that for people who are not choosing to engage in those activities, they don't necessarily have a safe space to be, or even necessarily a way to connect with other people who might be in a similar place where they're really just trying to stay focused on their recovery. Right.
Allison, there's so much. We could probably do 3 or 4 or 5 hours of this discussion, but I really appreciate, for one, and I know Molly does as well, you coming in and sharing your heart with us as far as what's so important in the work that you do in this recovery-friendly community idea. Are there any other things that you'd like to share with our audience that are really important for you to get out there?
I did forget one on things that can start to make a community more recovery friendly, is recovery housing. Like you said, we could probably take each one of these and make them an entire conversation, but recovery housing is very important. Individuals who are coming out of either incarceration or treatment or have just unstable living situations outside of those realms need a place to go that doesn't have substances and doesn't offer that as an option, as a coping skill that they're so familiar with, and allowing them a safe, sober living situation. And one thing that I was taught in a training is that for every dollar that a community invests in recovery, they get $44 back from each individual.
Wow.
And that's in income tax, property tax, and sales tax. And that is because these individuals now are holding down jobs and are supported with housing and able to get recovery housing and things that we who are maybe not in a place of active addiction have a hard time understanding that can be a struggle to find a stable place to live
Just
or
a
to
place
have
to live.
right.
Absolutely.
And so these are things that communities can do, and if we think about it as an investment into our communities, that's a pretty simple way. I mean, who wouldn't want to take $1 and turn it into $44
Absolutely.
and have healthier, happier community members?
Yeah, I think, a large part of our homelessness problem around our nation is related directly to substance use disorder that's gone untreated and mental health issues that have gone untreated. So
Absolutely.
You make a great point that if housing becomes available for folks that are dealing with this, that it helps the economy.
Absolutely.
And that alone should get government entities interested in doing something about it. Great point.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm so glad that we're starting this discussion related to recovery and just in general, and also how communities can become more recovery friendly, just because, it does seem like a very key component to an overall healthy community that we're not talking about enough. So thank you again for being here today. And if anyone has any questions, unless there's anything else you guys want to add, we'll just wrap this up. And anything else?
I just want to say thank you for coming in and joining Molly and I for our first podcast. And we really appreciate what you have to offer.
It's a lot to unpack, but I think it's a good place to start, and just starting with Stigma and learning from there.
Perfect.
Sounds good. And for anybody who wants any more information, you can always find us at www.upnorthprevention.org. We're happy to answer any questions that anyone comes up with related to this podcast. There will also be a video of this podcast on YouTube, so you can find us there. And we hope that you guys have a great day. And thanks again, Allison.
Thank you.
See everybody soon.
Look forward to everyone joining Molly and I for our next podcast. And Allison, we'd love to have you back to continue the discussion.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks.